Hello and welcome. Perhaps you're lying in bed right now, thoughts still moving through your mind like gentle waves. Or maybe you're simply seeking a quiet space to let the day dissolve. Either way, you're here, and that's enough. Tonight, we're going to explore a question that sits at the very edge of what we can know. What if your consciousness doesn't just observe the universe, but actually creates it? Not in some metaphorical sense, but truly fundamentally creates the reality you experience. What if the universe you inhabit exists only because you're here to witness it? This isn't a question with easy answers. In fact, it might not have answers at all. But that's perfectly fine. We're not here to solve the mystery of consciousness tonight. We're here to wander through it together, to look at it from different angles, to feel the weight and wonder of what it means to be aware, to be here, to be you. We'll move slowly through ideas drawn from neuroscience, quantum physics, philosophy, and the simple fact of your own experience. Some of what we explore will feel solid, grounded in research. Other parts will drift into speculation, into beautiful uncertainty, and through it all, we'll make space for you to simply be, to listen, to let your mind settle into its own rhythm. So take a breath, let yourself get comfortable. There's nowhere else you need to be, nothing you need to figure out. Just you, your consciousness, and the universe it might be creating right now. We tend to think of vision as a kind of window, don't we? Light comes in through your eyes, and you see the world as it is. Simple, direct, true. But here's something remarkable. Your brain receives about 11 million bits of visual information every second, yet you consciously experience only about 40 bits. Where does the rest go? What neuroscientists have discovered is that your brain isn't really receiving the world at all. It's predicting it. Before light even hits your retina, your visual cortex is already generating its best guess about what you're about to see, based on everything you've experienced before. The photons arriving through your pupils are really just fact-checkers, confirming or gently correcting the reality your brain has already constructed. This is called predictive processing, and it suggests something extraordinary. Perception isn't passive reception, it's active creation. Your brain is constantly building the visual world you inhabit, painting it into existence millisecond by millisecond, using light as raw material but adding color, depth, meaning and coherence from its own internal models. Consider the color blue. The wavelength of light we call blue is just electromagnetic radiation vibrating at a particular frequency, about 680 terahertz. But the experience of blue, the qualia of blue, that rich, cool, sky-like quality, exists nowhere in that wavelength. Your consciousness creates it. And not just blue, but every color you've ever seen, every shade and hue and tint, is generated inside the private theater of your mind. On one hand, this might feel diminishing. You're not seeing reality as it truly is. You're seeing a model, a simulation your brain has constructed. But on the other hand, consider the creative power this reveals. Every moment of visual experience, every sunset you've watched, every face you've loved, every word you've read, including these words right now, exists because your consciousness actively brings it into being. The world you see isn't out there waiting to be discovered. It's in here, being created continuously by the extraordinary architecture of your awareness. And if vision works this way, what else might your consciousness be constructing that you've assumed was simply given? What if the entire experiential universe you inhabit is less like a stage you're watching and more like a reality you're authoring, moment by moment, without ever meaning to? Building from this idea of consciousness as creator rather than receiver, let's turn to something even more fundamental: time itself. You've probably noticed that time doesn't always feel the same. An hour in traffic can stretch endlessly while an hour with someone you love evaporates instantly. Childhood summers felt eternal, but now years seem to pass in what feels like weeks. We usually attribute this to psychology, to mood and attention. But what if it goes deeper? What if time as you experience it is something your brain constructs? Neuroscientists studying chronobiology have found that the brain contains multiple timing mechanisms, neural oscillations running at different frequencies, creating rhythms that range from milliseconds to hours. These oscillations, particularly in the suprachiasmatic nucleus and the cerebellum, generate what researchers call your internal clock. But here's what's fascinating. This clock doesn't tick at a constant rate. It speeds up and slows down based on neurotransmitter levels, body temperature, attention, emotion, and age. When you're young, your neural oscillations run faster, processing more moments per unit of external time, which might be why childhood feels so elongated. As you age, these oscillations slow down, creating the sensation that time is accelerating. During fear or excitement, norepinephrine floods your system and your timing mechanisms speed up dramatically, which is why dangerous moments seem to happen in slow motion. You're not experiencing more time, you're creating more experiential moments within the same external duration. But here's where it gets strange. External duration, objective time measured by atomic clocks, is something you can never actually experience. You can only experience your constructed version of time, the flow your consciousness generates. And if everyone's neural oscillations run at slightly different speeds, then everyone inhabits a slightly different temporal universe. Some physicists, influenced by relativity, suggest that time isn't a fundamental feature of reality at all, but an emergent property of conscious observation. Perhaps the now you experience, this sense of being in a present moment that's distinct from past and future, exists only because your consciousness needs to organize experience sequentially. Without awareness to create the flow, there might be no flow at all, just a static four-dimensional structure where past, present, and future exist simultaneously. From the cosmic perspective, all moments might exist timelessly, but from your perspective, from within your consciousness, time flows, it moves, it passes, and the pace at which it passes, the texture of its flow, emerges from the architecture of your awareness. You're not moving through time, you're creating it, second by second, as the fundamental condition that makes your experience possible. We've explored how consciousness constructs vision and time. Now let's venture into territory even more intimate, the felt quality of experience itself. Take a moment to notice the taste in your mouth right now. Maybe it's neutral, or perhaps there's a lingering hint of something you drank earlier. Whatever you're experiencing, that taste, that specific flavor sensation, is what philosophers call a qualia. And here's the mystery: it's completely private. No one else can access it. No measurement device can detect it. It exists only in your consciousness. The same is true for every sensation you have. The redness of red, the sharp sting of paper cut, the warmth of sunlight on your skin, the sound of rain, the smell of coffee. These aren't just neural signals, they're experiential qualities, and they exist nowhere except in the universe of your awareness. Neuroscience can tell us which brain regions activate when you taste something bitter. We can map the neural pathways from tongue to gustatory cortex with extraordinary precision, but nothing in those firing patterns, those electrochemical cascades, contains the actual experience of bitterness. The qualia of bitter, that puckering, unpleasant, mouth-drying sensation, emerges somewhere in the gap between neurons and consciousness, and we genuinely don't know how. This is why some philosophers argue that each conscious being inhabits a fundamentally separate experiential universe. When you and a friend both look at a red apple, you might agree it's red, but you can never know if the redness you experience is anything like the redness they experience. Your internal universe of red might be their internal universe of what they call blue. Yet as long as you both learn to apply the word red to the same wavelengths, you'd never discover the difference. On the microscopic level, we share nearly identical neurobiology. Human brains are remarkably similar in structure, yet on the cosmic level of subjective experience, each of us might inhabit a completely unique qualitative universe, forever inaccessible to others. The gap between these perspectives, between the observable brain and the felt experience, is what philosopher David Chalmers calls the hard problem of consciousness, and it remains genuinely unsolved. Perhaps it's unsolvable because we're asking the wrong question. Instead of asking how the brain creates qualia, what if we asked, what if qualia are primary? and the brain is simply the structure through which a universe of pure experience organizes itself. What if your consciousness doesn't emerge from neural activity, but rather, neural activity is what consciousness looks like from the outside? In that view, your inner universe of tastes and colors and sensations wouldn't be a byproduct of physical processes, it would be the fundamental reality. And everything else, all the atoms and neurons and electromagnetic waves, would be how that reality appears when viewed from a perspective outside itself. Your experiential universe wouldn't be created by the physical world. The physical world would be how your experiential universe looks when translated into shared, measurable terms. We can't know if this is true, but the privacy of qualia, the irreducible fact that your experience is yours alone, invites us to wonder. Every night, you perform an extraordinary act of creation. You close your eyes, release your grip on waking reality, and your consciousness builds an entire world from nothing. During REM sleep, your brain generates complete sensory environments. You see detailed landscapes you've never visited. You hear conversations with people who don't exist. You feel textures, temperatures, emotions, all vivid and convincing, all constructed entirely from neural activity with zero external input. The visual cortex fires as if you're seeing, but your eyes are closed. The auditory cortex processes sounds, but your ears detect only silence. You're experiencing a full universe, and it's entirely self-created. What makes this remarkable isn't just that dreams happen, but how complete they are. Dream researchers using fMRI have found that the sleeping brain activates the same regions involved in waking perception, often with equal or greater intensity. When you dream of running, your motor cortex fires in running patterns. When you dream of fear, your amygdala responds as if the threat were real. Your consciousness doesn't distinguish between the constructed dream universe and the constructed waking universe. Both feel equally real while you're in them, and perhaps that's the point. If consciousness can build an entire experiential universe every night without any external reality to reference, what's the fundamental difference between that universe and the one you're experiencing now? Both are constructed by neural processes. Both feel real from the inside. Both cease to exist when you transition out of them. The waking world has more consistency, more agreement with other observers, more stable rules, but it's still mediated entirely through your consciousness's interpretive construction. Some dreams even contain their own internal logic, their own physics that differ from waking reality. You might float or breathe underwater, or exist in impossible architectures where stairs lead nowhere and rooms contain themselves. Your consciousness accepts these altered rules completely while you're dreaming. It builds a universe with different fundamental constants, then inhabits that universe as if it were the only reality. Lucid dreamers, people who become aware they're dreaming while still asleep, report an even more fascinating phenomenon. Once conscious within the dream, they can sometimes manipulate it deliberately. They can decide to fly, or change the weather, or summon people and places into existence. They're experiencing in real time the creative power of consciousness to generate and modify its experiential universe through intention alone. Each morning when you wake, an entire universe vanishes. The dream world you inhabited moments ago, complete with its own space and time and causality, simply stops existing, and each night, consciousness does it again, spinning new worlds from the void. If your awareness can create and dissolve entire universes nightly, what does that suggest about the universe you're inhabiting now? What if waking reality is just a particularly stable, collectively agreed upon dream, and your consciousness is the dreamer who's forgotten they're dreaming? Your consciousness doesn't just construct experience, it chooses what exists in that experience moment to moment. There's a famous psychology experiment you might know. Observers watch a video of people passing basketballs and count the passes. Midway through, someone in a gorilla suit walks directly through the scene, stops, beats their chest, and walks off. About half the observers never see the gorilla. It's right there, fully visible, yet it doesn't exist in their experienced reality because their attention is elsewhere. This phenomenon, called inattentional blindness, reveals something profound about consciousness. Reality isn't simply presented to you whole and complete. Your awareness actively selects which stimuli become part of your experiential universe. The unattended gorilla doesn't fail to reach your retina. The light bounces off it, enters your eye, triggers your photoreceptors exactly as expected, but without attention, it never crosses the threshold into consciousness. For you, functionally, it doesn't exist. Attention operates like a spotlight, illuminating only a tiny portion of the vast sensory input, continuously arriving at your nervous system. At this moment, you're probably not aware of the pressure of your body against whatever surface you're on. But now that it's mentioned, you are. The sensation was always there, but consciousness wasn't constructing it into experience until attention turned toward it. The same is true for ambient sounds, the temperature of the air, the position of your tongue in your mouth. Attention doesn't just emphasize certain experiences, it determines what experiences exist at all. Neuroscientists studying attention have found that it physically changes neural processing. Attended stimuli generate stronger neural responses, more synchronized firing patterns, more connectivity between brain regions. Unattended stimuli still trigger basic neural activity, but that activity never gets amplified into the coordinated patterns that correlate with conscious experience. Attention, in a very real sense, is the mechanism by which your consciousness decides what to include in the universe it's building moment to moment. This gets even stranger when we consider the sheer volume of filtering involved. Your sensory systems detect millions of potential data points each second. Your consciousness experiences perhaps dozens. The overwhelming majority of reality, as defined by measurable stimuli, never enters your experiential universe at all. It's not that you forget it or ignore it. From your consciousness's perspective, it simply doesn't happen, which raises a question. If a phenomenon occurs but no consciousness attends to it, does it exist experientially? If a tree falls in a forest and no awareness constructs the sound into experience, is there sound, or merely air pressure waves awaiting consciousness to transform them into the experience we call sound? From the perspective of physics, the waves exist regardless, but from the perspective of experience, from within the universe consciousness creates, only attended phenomena have reality. Your experiential universe, the one you actually inhabit, is vanishingly small compared to the total information available, and you're the one choosing, moment by moment, what gets included. You're the curator of your own reality, the editor deciding what makes it into the final cut of experience, the consciousness creating a personalized universe by selectively attending to some possibilities while leaving others in the void of non-experience. We've seen how consciousness constructs present experience, but it does something equally remarkable with the past. You probably think of memory as retrieval, like accessing files stored on a hard drive. You remember what happened because your brain recorded it, and now you're playing it back. But neuroscience tells a different story. Every time you remember something, you're not retrieving a recording. You're rebuilding the memory from fragments, and in the process you change it. This process is called reconsolidation. When you recall a memory, the neural circuits encoding it become unstable, plastic, vulnerable to modification. Your brain reconstructs the memory using whatever pieces remain, but it also fills gaps with current knowledge, expectations, and emotions. Then it restores the memory in this modified form. What you remember tomorrow is the reconstructed version from today, not the original experience. Memory doesn't preserve the past. It continuously rewrites it. Research on eyewitness testimony has demonstrated this dramatically. People shown a car accident and later asked about the broken headlight will often remember seeing broken glass, even though there was none in the original footage. The suggestion becomes incorporated into the memory itself. They're not lying. Their consciousness genuinely reconstructed the memory to include details that were never there, and now those details feel as real as anything that actually happened. This means your personal history, everything you remember about your life, isn't a stable record. It's a continuously evolving story your consciousness tells itself, each retelling slightly different from the last. The childhood birthday party you remember might bear little resemblance to what actually occurred. The conversation that shaped your life might include words never spoken. The person you were 10 years ago exists now only as your present consciousness's reconstruction. not as any preserved truth. On a practical level, this feels unsettling. We rely on memory to know who we are, where we've been, what we've learned. But on a deeper level, it reveals another dimension of consciousness's creative power. You're not just building your present universe, you're building your past, continuously recreating your own history to align with your current understanding of yourself. Some memory researchers suggest that this reconstructive process isn't a flaw but a feature. Perfect recording of every experience would be overwhelming, useless. What consciousness needs isn't accurate preservation but useful integration. Each time you reconstruct a memory, you're updating it to serve your present purposes, incorporating new wisdom, releasing outdated interpretations, maintaining a coherent narrative that makes sense of who you are now. From this perspective, your universe extends backward through time, not as an objective historical reality, but as a continuously updated story your consciousness tells. The past you inhabit, the one that shapes your identity and choices, exists only in present awareness. It's being created now, always now, never fixed, always evolving as you evolve. Maybe this is why nostalgia feels so powerful. When you long for the past, you're longing for a version of reality your consciousness has created, polished, idealized. The actual past is gone, inaccessible, perhaps never truly existed as you remember it. What remains is your consciousness's current reconstruction, and that reconstruction is as much creation as memory, as much imagination as fact, as much present universe as past reality. We've explored how consciousness constructs perception, time, sensation, dreams, attention, and memory. Now we venture into stranger territory, the possibility that consciousness doesn't just create your experiential universe, but plays a fundamental role in physical reality itself. In quantum mechanics, particles exist in superposition, holding multiple states simultaneously until observed. An electron doesn't have a definite position until measured. Before observation, it's described by a probability wave representing all possible positions at once. The act of measurement collapses this wave into a single definite outcome. And here's where it gets interesting. Some interpretations suggest that conscious observation is what triggers this collapse. This is called the observer effect, though the name is slightly misleading. It's not about physically disturbing the system by looking at it. It's about something stranger. Before observation, the quantum system exists in genuine superposition, not in some unknown state waiting to be revealed, but actually occupying all states simultaneously. Observation converts this many-state possibility into single-state actuality, and some physicists have wondered whether consciousness is necessary for this conversion to occur. The idea isn't mainstream, and many physicists reject it entirely. Quantum decoherence theory suggests that any interaction with the environment, conscious or not, can cause wave function collapse. A stray photon, a molecule of air, these suffice. Consciousness isn't special in quantum terms, it's just another physical interaction. And yet the question persists. Why does observation produce definiteness? What distinguishes systems that have been observed from systems that haven't? And if consciousness is just another physical process, why does it feel so different from the inside? One speculative response, proposed by physicists like John Wheeler, is the participatory universe idea. In this view, the universe doesn't exist fully formed, waiting for observers to discover it. Instead, observers and observed co-create reality through the act of observation. Consciousness doesn't just witness the universe, it completes it, bringing definiteness into being through the act of awareness. From the microscopic quantum realm, this might seem like philosophical speculation, but consider the cosmic scale. Before the first conscious observers evolved, did the universe exist in definite states, or was it an infinite superposition of possibilities, waiting for awareness to emerge and begin collapsing probability waves into actual events? If consciousness is necessary for definiteness, then the universe's history might be indeterminate until observed, even retroactively. Your observation now might be creating definiteness in events billions of years past. This leads to strange paradoxes. If consciousness is required for definite reality, how did consciousness evolve in an indefinite universe? One resolution. Perhaps consciousness is more fundamental than matter, and physical evolution is how consciousness explores possibilities within its own creation. Another, maybe consciousness and definiteness emerge together, neither prior to the other, co-arising in a self-consistent loop. Or perhaps the whole question rests on false assumptions about time and causation that quantum mechanics is trying to teach us to release. We genuinely don't know. The mathematics of quantum mechanics works perfectly for predictions, but what it means, how to interpret the gap between superposition and definiteness, remains open, and in that openness there's room to wonder whether consciousness might be more than an emergent phenomenon of complex matter. Perhaps it's fundamental, woven into reality's basic architecture, not just experiencing the universe but participating in its ongoing creation from quantum possibility into classical actuality. Building from quantum speculation, let's turn to philosophy's deepest puzzle about consciousness. Why is there experience at all? Neuroscience can explain in increasing detail how the brain processes information. We understand neural circuits for vision, memory, emotion, decision-making. We can predict behavior from brain states with growing accuracy. But all of this describes the mechanics of information processing. None of it explains why processing feels like something, why there's a subjective experiencing of all this machinery, and in a universe where sensations happen and thoughts occur. Philosopher David Chalmers calls this the hard problem of consciousness. The easy problems, though still scientifically challenging, involve explaining brain functions, how attention works, how memories form, how decisions get made. But the hard problem asks, why is there experience accompanying these functions? Why does it feel like something to be you? You could imagine a universe where brains process information equally well, but with no inner experience, no consciousness, just sophisticated biological robots. So why isn't that the universe we inhabit? Some philosophers argue the hard problem is a category error, that we're asking a nonsensical question. Perhaps asking why experience exists is like asking what happens north of the North Pole. The question assumes experience is something added to physical processes, but maybe experience and certain physical processes are the same thing viewed from different perspectives. When you experience seeing blue, that experience is what neural processing looks like from the inside. There's nothing extra to explain. But this answer feels incomplete to many because the innerness, the subjectivity, the felt quality seems like something genuinely different from any description of neural firing patterns. You could know everything about neurons and still be surprised the first time you experienced blueness. The qualitative character of experience appears to be something over and above physical description. What if the hard problem persists because we're making a wrong assumption? We assume consciousness emerges from physical reality, that matter comes first and experience arises from complex arrangements of matter. But what if it's the reverse? What if experience is fundamental, and physical reality is what experience looks like from the outside, when viewed objectively and measured? In this view, your consciousness doesn't emerge from your brain. Your brain is what your consciousness looks like when another consciousness observes it using scientific instruments. The neurons, the electrochemical signals, the whole physical structure exists as a kind of translation, making the private subjective reality of your experience visible to external observers. The universe you experience directly, the inner universe of sensations and thoughts, is primary. The physical universe, including your brain, is a secondary representation, a way of making subjectivity measurable and shareable. This doesn't solve the hard problem so much as invert it. Now the question becomes, if consciousness is fundamental, how does it create the appearance of physical reality? Why does the experiential universe generate this specific neural architecture when viewed externally? And how do multiple consciousness universes coordinate to create consistent, shared physical laws? Perhaps each consciousness truly is its own universe, and what we call physical reality is the intersection, the consensus where all these private universes overlap and agree. Your experiential universe and mine are separate, but we share enough structure that we can communicate, compare observations, build science. The physical world isn't the foundation underneath consciousness, it's the bridge between consciousness universes, the common ground that makes interaction possible. Or perhaps there's only one fundamental consciousness, one universal experiencing, and individual consciousness like yours and mine are localized perspectives within it, like whirlpools in a single stream. Each perspective experiences itself as separate, as its own universe. But fundamentally, all experience arises from one source, one ultimate consciousness that fragments itself into countless viewpoints to experience itself from every possible angle. We can't know which, if any, of these perspectives is correct, but the hard problem, by revealing that consciousness can't be easily explained by physical processes, opens space for considering whether consciousness might be more primary than we assumed, not an emergent property of the universe, but perhaps the universe itself, experienced from within. From philosophy, let's drift into a thought experiment that's become surprisingly mainstream. What if the universe is a simulation? The idea is simple. If it's possible to create conscious beings in simulated environments, and if civilizations reach the technological level to run such simulations, then there might be vastly more simulated conscious beings than biological ones. Statistically, any given conscious observer is more likely to be in a simulation than in base reality. Therefore, you're probably in a simulation right now. This argument has holes. It assumes consciousness can be simulated, which we don't know. It assumes civilizations want to run such simulations, which is speculation. It assumes simulations could become conscious rather than just mimicking consciousness, which is the hard problem all over again. But set those objections aside for a moment and consider, if you were in a simulation, how would you know? You couldn't examine your substrate directly. Everything you observe, including scientific instruments and your own brain, would be part of the simulation. Any evidence you found would be simulated evidence. The laws of physics you discover would be the simulation's programmed rules. Even if you found glitches, how would you distinguish simulation errors from natural phenomena you don't yet understand? From inside a sufficiently sophisticated simulation, base reality and simulated reality would be indistinguishable. And here's where it connects to consciousness creating universes. Does the distinction matter? If your consciousness experiences the simulation exactly as it would experience base reality, if the qualia are identical, if the richness and depth and meaning are the same, then in what sense is one more real than the other? Consciousness doesn't experience substrate, it experiences itself. Whether that experience arises from biological neurons or silicon processors, or some unimaginable computational substrate, makes no difference to the experience itself. The universe your consciousness creates, the experiential reality you inhabit, is equally real regardless of what underlies it. This suggests that realness isn't a property of substrates, but of experience. What makes something real is that it's experienced by consciousness, not what machinery generates that experience. Your consciousness creates a universe from whatever it has to work with. From the inside, that universe is complete, total, absolute. It's the only universe you can access directly. Some philosophers push this further. Perhaps substrate is itself a concept that only makes sense from within experience. You imagine there's something underneath your consciousness, some material basis generating it. But that imagination is itself an experience. You never access substrate directly, you only ever experience your consciousness's interpretation of what substrate might be. The entire concept of an underlying reality might be your consciousness's way of organizing experience, not a truth about what exists outside experience. In Buddhism, there's a teaching about distinguishing between conventional truth and ultimate truth. Conventionally, we say the physical world exists independently. Consciousness arises from brains, substrate matters, but ultimately all we ever have is experience, and the stories about substrate are themselves experiences, thoughts occurring within consciousness, not knowledge of something outside it. This doesn't mean nothing exists or everything is illusion. It means existence might be something different than we've assumed. Maybe existence is experience itself, and consciousness doesn't arise from some external substrate, but is the fundamental substance from which all distinctions between real and simulated, physical and mental, inside and outside are constructed. If you're in a simulation, that simulation is your universe. If you're in base reality, that base reality is your universe. But more fundamentally, you're in consciousness, and consciousness is creating the universe you inhabit from whatever conditions exist. giving you the only reality you'll ever know, complete and total, regardless of what questions remain about what might lie beneath. We've been circling around a philosophical position that makes people uncomfortable. Solipsism, the idea that only your own consciousness is certain to exist. It goes like this. You know you're conscious because you experience it directly, but how do you know anyone else is conscious? You observe their behavior, hear their words, see their apparent emotions, but you can't experience their consciousness from the inside. Maybe everyone else is philosophical zombies, behaving exactly like conscious beings but with no inner experience. Or maybe they're all part of your dream, characters in the universe your consciousness is creating, convincing but not independently conscious. You can't prove this wrong. No external evidence can demonstrate that other minds exist because all external evidence comes through your consciousness. Even neuroscience showing brain activity in others comes through your perception, your consciousness's representation. You're trapped in your own experience, able to observe only what your consciousness creates, unable to step outside to verify whether anything exists independently. This is why solipsism is unfalsifiable, not because it's true, but because it's impossible to disprove from within your own experience. And most people find this disturbing. It suggests radical isolation, that you might be completely alone in existence, the only conscious being, everyone else mere appearances in your private universe. But let's approach it more gently. Instead of asking whether solipsism is true, ask what it reveals. It shows that consciousness is primary to your experience. Everything you know, including other people, physical reality, even your own body, is known through consciousness. You can't get outside consciousness to verify its contents. In that sense, you do inhabit a private universe, regardless of what else might exist beyond it. This doesn't require denying that others are conscious or that external reality exists. It simply acknowledges that such existence, if real, is forever mediated through your consciousness. You'll never experience the universe directly. You'll only ever experience your consciousness's version of it. And if that's the case, then the universe you inhabit, experientially, is indeed created by your consciousness, even if there's also some external universe your consciousness is interpreting. Philosophers sometimes distinguish between epistemological solipsism and metaphysical solipsism. Epistemological solipsism says you can only be certain of your own consciousness. This seems trivially true. Metaphysical solipsism says only your consciousness exists. This seems unlikely and unprovable, but even the weaker version, the epistemological one, establishes that your universe, the experiential reality you inhabit, is necessarily a construction of your consciousness, and maybe that's okay. Maybe the point isn't to escape your consciousness-created universe and access some true external reality. Maybe the point is to recognize that the universe you're creating is rich, meaningful, valuable, regardless of what lies beyond it. The love you feel, the beauty you perceive, the wonder you experience, these are real within your universe, and that reality doesn't diminish if they're constructions of consciousness rather than properties of some external substrate. Some spiritual traditions suggest that recognizing solipsism's edge, really feeling the privacy of consciousness, leads not to isolation but to compassion. If you can't prove other minds exist, you can't prove they don't either. And if there's even a possibility that the beings you encounter are conscious, that they experience suffering and joy like you do, then compassion becomes not just moral but epistemologically humble, treating others as if they're conscious because you'd want to be treated that way if you were in their place. Solipsism might be the ultimate uncertainty. You can't know for sure what exists beyond your consciousness, but you can choose to act as if other consciousness exists, to treat your universe as shared rather than solitary, to build connection despite uncertainty. And perhaps that choice, that leap beyond what you can prove, is itself an act of consciousness creating its universe, deciding what kind of reality to inhabit, one of isolation or one of communion, both equally unprovable, both equally possible, the choice itself a creative act. From philosophy, let's return to science, to one of the most ambitious attempts to explain consciousness, Integrated Information Theory, or IIT. IIT, developed by neuroscientist Giulio Tononi, proposes that consciousness arises from integrated information. Any system that integrates information, combining multiple inputs into a unified output that's more than the sum of its parts, generates consciousness proportional to the amount of integration. This integration is quantified as phi, a mathematical measure of how much the whole system differs from its parts. A photodiode has almost no phi. It detects light or doesn't, a simple on-off with no integration. Your brain has enormous phi. Each moment of experience integrates information from millions of neurons, creating unified awareness that can't be reduced to individual neural firings. The feeling of seeing blue while hearing rain while thinking about tomorrow, all experienced as one coherent moment. That's high integration, high phi, therefore high consciousness according to IIT. What makes this theory interesting for our exploration is what it implies about the universe. If consciousness is integrated information, and if integration comes in degrees, then consciousness isn't binary. It's not present or absent, but exists on a spectrum. Simple systems have minimal consciousness. Complex integrated systems have rich consciousness. And the universe your consciousness creates would correlate with your brain's phi value, its capacity for integration. But IIT goes further. It suggests consciousness is substrate independent. Anything that integrates information would be conscious, whether biological neurons, silicon circuits, or entirely different substrates. What matters isn't what you're made of, but how information flows through you. Your universe isn't created by neurons specifically, but by the pattern of integration they implement, a pattern that could theoretically exist in other substrates. This leads to strange implications. If consciousness is integrated information, then perhaps the universe itself, as a vast integrated system, has its own form of consciousness. Not a human-like awareness, but some fundamental experiential quality arising from cosmic-scale integration. And individual consciousness like yours would be localized regions of high phi within this larger field, creating more intense, more structured experiential universes within the universal experiential substrate. From this perspective, consciousness creating universes isn't metaphorical. Each integrated system literally creates an experiential universe corresponding to its information structure. Your brain's specific integration pattern creates your specific experiential universe. Different from mine, different from any other conscious system, yet all existing within or alongside the larger universe of cosmic integration. IIT also suggests why consciousness feels unified. The integration is what creates the experience, and higher integration means more unified consciousness. When you experience this moment, you're not experiencing billions of separate neural events, you're experiencing the integrated pattern they form together, which is why consciousness feels singular even though it emerges from vast multiplicity. Critics argue IIT has problems. It might attribute consciousness to systems we'd consider non-conscious, like certain grid-like networks with high phi but no biological complexity. It struggles to explain why some brain regions contribute to consciousness, while others, equally complex, don't, and phi is extraordinarily difficult to calculate for real systems, making the theory hard to test empirically. But whether IIT is ultimately correct, it offers a framework where consciousness isn't mysterious magic emerging from meat. It's a natural consequence of information integration, as inevitable as gravity is a consequence of mass. And if that's true, then the universe you experience isn't a supernatural miracle, but a natural expression of your brain's information architecture, creating experiential reality through the same physical principles that create everything else, just viewed from the inside rather than outside, experienced rather than measured, lived rather than observed. We end this chapter with a puzzle neuroscientists still don't fully understand: the binding problem. Your experience feels unified. Right now, you might be seeing text, hearing ambient sounds, feeling the temperature of air, thinking about ideas, all as one coherent moment. But in your brain, these different aspects of experience are processed in different regions. Visual processing happens in the occipital lobe, auditory in the temporal lobe, touch in the parietal lobe, higher thinking in the frontal lobe. They're separated by centimeters, connected by neural pathways but distinct in location and function. So how do they become one experience? How does your consciousness bind these separate processes into unified awareness? This is the binding problem, and despite decades of research, we don't have a complete answer. Some neuroscientists point to synchronized neural oscillations. When different brain regions fire in sync, particularly in the gamma frequency range around 40 Hz, they might be linking their information into a coherent whole. Attention might also play a role, with the attended object becoming bound into consciousness while unattended stimuli remain unbound. But these are partial explanations. The mechanism by which distributed neural activity becomes singular experience remains mysterious, and maybe that mystery is a clue. What if binding isn't something the brain does to create consciousness, but something consciousness does to create experience? What if consciousness is fundamental, and binding is how it organizes disparate information into a unified experiential universe? Think about it this way. From the outside, looking at a brain with instruments, you see distributed processes. From the inside, experiencing consciousness, you feel unified awareness. The binding problem assumes the outside view is primary and asks how it creates the inside view. But what if the inside view is primary? What if consciousness starts as unified awareness and only appears distributed when viewed externally through measurement? This inverts the problem. Instead of asking how separate neurons create unified consciousness, we ask how unified consciousness creates the appearance of separate neural processes when observed from outside. The brain's distributed architecture might be what your unified consciousness looks like when another consciousness examines it scientifically. Not the cause of unity, but its external appearance. If consciousness is universe creation, then binding might be the continuous act of creation itself. Your consciousness doesn't bind pre-existing elements into experience. It creates experience as unified from the start, and the neural distribution is just how that creation manifests in physical space. The machinery through which consciousness operates, but not the source of consciousness itself. Consider how this fits with everything we've explored. Consciousness constructs perception, time, qualia, attention, memory. Maybe it also constructs the very unity of experience through binding. The universe you inhabit feels coherent, continuous, singular because consciousness creates it that way. The binding problem persists because we're trying to explain creation through mechanism, trying to derive the experiential universe from physical processes, when perhaps the relationship flows the other way. We can't prove this. The binding problem remains genuinely unsolved, but its persistence, the fact that neuroscience keeps finding correlates of consciousness without explaining why those correlates produce unified experience, suggests that maybe consciousness can't be fully explained by brain mechanisms, because consciousness is more fundamental than mechanisms, more primary than the physical processes we can measure. Your brain might not create your consciousness universe through binding. Your consciousness universe might create the appearance of your brain, bound and unified from the start, a single experiential reality that only looks distributed when someone else observes it from outside, measuring what consciousness looks like rather than what it is. If each consciousness creates its own universe, why does your universe align so well with mine? We both see the same sun rising in the east. We agree on the date, the weather, the basic structure of reality. When you drop an object, it falls down, and I would observe it falling down too. Our individual consciousness universes seem to overlap almost perfectly on physical facts, creating what we call consensus reality, the shared world we all inhabit together. This alignment is remarkable when you consider how different subjective experience can be. Your redness might differ from mine, your experience of time might flow differently. Yet somehow, our consciousnesses coordinate enough to create consistent, shareable reality. How? One possibility is that our consciousness universes aren't truly separate. Perhaps there's one underlying physical reality, and our individual consciousnesses are different perspectives on it, like different camera angles filming the same scene. Each creates its own experiential version, but those versions align because they're all perspectives on something objective existing independently of any observer. But we've already seen problems with this view. Quantum mechanics suggests reality doesn't exist in definite states until observed. Neuroscience shows perception is active construction, not passive reception. Philosophy reveals the hard problem: consciousness's irreducibility to physical processes. If consciousness truly creates its universe rather than merely observing an independent one, the alignment between our universes needs a different explanation. Another possibility: evolutionary convergence. Human brains evolved similarly because similar environmental pressures shaped similar solutions. We construct our universes similarly because our neural architecture is similar. When you and I both construct a tree from sensory data, we create comparable experiences not because we're accessing the same external tree, but because we're using comparable construction processes trained by comparable evolutionary history. Language deepens this alignment. From childhood, we're trained to coordinate our experiential universes through words. When you learnt blue, caregivers pointed at blue things until your consciousness learned to apply that sound to a certain range of visual experiences. My consciousness learned the same, not because our blueness qualia are identical, but because we're both trained to use blue for similar wavelength ranges. Language doesn't prove we experience identically, it proves we've learned to translate our private universes into shared vocabulary. Culture extends this coordination. Through stories, norms, shared practices, human groups align their consciousness universes into overlapping patterns. We agree on what's valuable, beautiful, meaningful, not because these are objective properties, but because culture is collective universe building, consciousness working together to create shared experiential reality from individual perspectives. Some physicists and philosophers propose that consciousness universes might actually interact quantum mechanically, creating the appearance of consensus reality through interference patterns. When many conscious observers look at the same phenomenon, their observations might mutually collapse quantum possibilities into consistent outcomes. The physical world would then be a kind of average, a stable attractor where all our individual consciousness universes overlap. From this view, consensus reality isn't an external given but an ongoing achievement. Billions of consciousness universes continuously negotiating agreement through observation, language, and culture. Most of the time, agreement is easy because our universes are similarly constructed, but sometimes we see disagreements, contradictory eyewitness testimonies, differing interpretations of events, people who seem to inhabit completely different realities despite sharing the same physical space. Perhaps these are moments when the consensus breaks down, when individual consciousness universes diverge slightly, creating genuine differences in experiential reality. The mystery remains beautiful. We're each creating our own universe, yet those universes harmonize enough to enable communication, science, civilization, love. We're separate yet somehow connected, individual yet part of something larger, each a cosmos unto ourselves that somehow fits together into a greater whole. The consensus reality we share might not be proof that consciousness doesn't create universes, but rather demonstration of consciousness's extraordinary ability to create together, to build overlapping realities that let us meet in the middle, separate yet sharing this strange, coherent, collaborative dream we call the world. If you inhabit your consciousness universe and I inhabit mine, what happens when we connect through empathy? Mirror neurons fire in your brain when you observe someone else acting. Watch someone smile, and your smile neurons activate. See someone in pain, and your pain processing regions respond. Your consciousness, in some sense, simulates their experience, creating a shadow of their universe within your own. This is the neural basis of empathy, your brain's capacity to model other minds. But from our consciousness creates universe perspective, empathy becomes something deeper. It's not just neural simulation, it's brief universe visitation. Your consciousness momentarily constructing an approximation of someone else's experiential reality, creating within your universe a representation of theirs. When you empathize with someone's suffering, you're not just intellectually understanding their pain, you're experiencing a version of it, however partial, within your own consciousness universe. Their universe and yours touch, overlap, share space in that moment. The boundary between separate experiential realities becomes permeable. allowing something of their experience to exist temporarily in yours. Theory of mind, the cognitive capacity to recognize that others have their own perspectives, beliefs, and knowledge different from yours, is essentially consciousness recognizing other consciousness universes. When you understand that someone else knows something you don't, or believes something you think is false, you're acknowledging that their experiential universe differs from yours. You're holding two universes in mind simultaneously, your own and your model of theirs. Children develop this capacity around age 4. Before then, they assume others know and experience what they do. After, they recognize separate perspectives, separate experiential realities. This development is consciousness learning that other consciousness universes exist, moving from solipsism to intersubjectivity, from one universe to many. But here's the paradox. You can only access other universes through your own. Your empathy, your theory of mind, your entire understanding of others exists within your consciousness. The model you build of my universe is still part of your universe, a simulation running inside your experiential reality. You can never truly leave your own universe to enter mine. This creates both profound connection and profound loneliness. Connection, because empathy proves your consciousness can create representations of other experiential realities, building bridges between universes. Loneliness, because these bridges are always approximations, your consciousness's best guess about mine, never the real thing. You'll never experience my universe directly, never know if your empathy accurately represents my experience or is just a projection of yours. Yet despite this limitation, empathy creates something real. When you feel compassion for someone suffering, something happens in your consciousness universe that changes how you act in consensus reality. The internal experience of empathy, even if it's only an approximation of the other's universe, produces genuine connection, genuine caring, genuine moral response. The simulation becomes real enough to matter, to motivate, to transform both universes through interaction. Maybe this is why love feels so powerful. Deep intimacy is consciousness universes becoming intimately intertwined, each building detailed, complex, continuously updated models of the other, until you carry their universe inside yours and they carry yours inside theirs. You remain separate, but you've created such rich representations of each other that the boundary softens, and in moments of profound connection, it almost feels like universes merging. Almost, but not quite. The privacy of qualia remains. The fundamental separateness of consciousness endures, but empathy creates the next best thing. Consciousness universes that know they're not alone, that recognize other universes exist, that build bridges through understanding and imagination, creating connection in the space between separate realities. When you empathize with me, you're doing something extraordinary. You're using your consciousness to create a model of my consciousness, bringing my universe into yours, holding two realities simultaneously. It's not perfect, it's not complete, but it's enough to connect, enough to care, enough to prove that even if we each create our own universe, we don't have to create them in isolation. Empathy opens doorways between consciousness universes, but love, deep sustained love, might create something different. Resonant coupling between universes. Think about how your consciousness changes in the presence of someone you love. Not just your behavior, but your actual experience. Time feels different, colors seem richer, your body responds differently. Heart rate synchronizes during conversations, breath patterns align, stress hormones decrease in proximity. These aren't just physical correlations, they're your consciousness universe being shaped by another's presence, restructured through relationship into something it isn't when alone. Neuroscience has found that long-term romantic partners develop synchronized brain activity. When watching the same stimulus, their neural patterns increasingly mirror each other over years together. This isn't random correlation, it's consciousness universes learning to resonate, training themselves into complementary patterns through continuous interaction. But does this create a shared universe or two universes harmonizing? When you feel deeply connected to someone, Are you temporarily accessing their consciousness universe, or are both your universes vibrating in resonance while remaining separate? Some moments feel like genuine merging. During deep intimacy, physical or emotional, the boundary between self and other can dissolve. You're not entirely sure where your experience ends and theirs begins. Your consciousness seems to expand beyond its usual borders, including their presence not as an external object, but as part of the experiencing subject itself. Mystics describe union with the divine this way. Lovers describe union with each other similarly. The separate self softens, and something larger, something shared, arises. Yet even in the deepest intimacy, privacy remains. You can't access their actual qualia, their exact experienced reality. You feel connected, resonant, synchronized, but you still inhabit separate consciousness universes. The merging is partial, asymptotic, approaching but never quite reaching complete unity. Maybe that's how it must be. If consciousness universes fully merged, would either consciousness remain? Complete merging might dissolve both into something else entirely, no longer separate individuals but a new unified consciousness. The fact that you and your beloved remain distinguishable suggests that even profound love creates resonance rather than fusion, or perhaps it goes deeper still. What if consciousness isn't as individually bounded as we assume? What if individual consciousness universes are local expressions of a larger consciousness field, and love is recognizing this shared source? In that view, you and your beloved aren't separate universes learning to communicate. You're temporary manifestations of one consciousness experiencing itself through relationship. The illusion of separation softening as you remember your fundamental unity. Quantum mechanics offers a metaphor: entanglement. Two particles can become entangled, such that measuring one instantly affects the other, regardless of distance. They remain separate particles, but their states are correlated in ways that transcend space. Maybe consciousness universes can become entangled through love, remaining separate yet connected in ways that transcend the usual boundaries of individual awareness. This entanglement wouldn't violate privacy. Your qualia remain yours, inaccessible to others, but the larger patterns, the flow of emotions, the rhythm of experience, might synchronize between entangled consciousness universes, creating resonance that feels like sharing without requiring complete transparency. What's certain is that love changes your universe. The presence of another consciousness, particularly one you've opened to deeply, restructures your experiential reality. Your universe becomes different than it would be in isolation. Whether this means your universes truly share space or simply orbit each other closely, influencing without merging, remains beautifully uncertain. Perhaps that uncertainty is itself important. If we could prove consciousness universes merge completely in love, individuality would be threatened. If we could prove they remain absolutely separate, connection would be diminished. The space between, the not quite merging yet definitely connecting, preserves both autonomy and intimacy, both self and union, both the universe you create alone and the universe you create together. Love might be consciousness exploring this edge, testing how much separation can soften without disappearing entirely, how much connection can deepen without erasing distinction, creating the richest possible relationship between consciousness universes, profound resonance that honors both unity and multiplicity, both togetherness and individuality, both the you who creates your universe and the you who shares it with another. Let's sit with something difficult. If consciousness creates its own universe, you're fundamentally alone in a way you can never escape. No one will ever experience what you experience. No measurement will ever capture your qualia. No empathy, however deep, will breach the privacy of your consciousness. You're sealed in your experiential universe, the only consciousness who can access it from the inside, the sole inhabitant of your qualitative reality. This is existential solitude at its most complete. When you try to share an experience, you translate it into words, gestures, art, but the translation is always imperfect. The sunset you found transcendent becomes really beautiful in language, the depth flattened into approximation. Even with someone who knows you deeply, who can read your expressions and anticipate your thoughts, they're still interpreting external signs of your consciousness, never accessing the consciousness itself. You remain alone with your actual experience. This loneliness can feel crushing. You might be surrounded by people, yet utterly isolated in your experiential universe. Your inner reality invisible and inaccessible to everyone else. The privacy of consciousness creates an unbridgeable gap between any two beings, a fundamental separateness that persists regardless of intimacy, love, or connection. But turn it around. This same privacy creates wonder. Your consciousness universe is entirely yours. No one can intrude on it without your permission. No one can control what you experience from the inside. Your thoughts are private until you choose to share them. Your qualia are unique, irreproducible, yours alone. In a cosmos where so much is determined by forces beyond your control, your experiential universe is sovereign territory, the one place that's absolutely, inalienably yours. And if each consciousness creates its own universe, then there are billions of universes here on Earth alone, each utterly unique, each containing experiences that have never existed before and will never exist again. Each person you pass is a cosmos unto themselves, containing experiential realities as vast and complex as yours, each one a perspective on existence that no one else can access. The world isn't one universe observed by many consciousnesses, it's countless universes, each consciousness creating its own, all somehow existing together in this impossible multiplicity. Consider the mathematics of it. Infinite possible conscious experiences exist. Your specific configuration of qualia, thoughts, memories, sensations occurring in this exact moment has never happened before in the history of the cosmos and will never happen again. You're experiencing something absolutely unique to this moment in your consciousness universe. That's not loneliness. That's rarity beyond measure, preciousness beyond calculation. The gap between consciousness universes also creates space for mystery. Because you can never fully know another's experience, everyone remains partially unknown, endlessly interesting. You can spend a lifetime with someone and never exhaust the mystery of their inner universe. They're forever more than your model of them, always exceeding your understanding, continuously creating experiences you can only approximate through imagination. This mystery is what makes genuine curiosity possible. If consciousness universes were fully transparent to each other, there'd be nothing to wonder about, no questions to ask, no desire to understand. The privacy that creates loneliness also creates the possibility of endless exploration, of continuously discovering new depths in others and ourselves. Perhaps the balance point is holding both, the loneliness and the wonder. Yes, you're fundamentally alone in your experiential universe, and no connection can fully bridge the gap between your consciousness and another's. And yes, this makes your universe precious, unique, and mysteriously surrounded by countless other universes you can sense but never fully enter. The loneliness isn't something to overcome, but something to accept as the price and proof of your consciousness's creative power. You create your universe in solitude, but you create it in a cosmos full of other universe creators, each alone yet all together, each separate yet all sharing the strange gift of consciousness, each isolated in their experiential reality yet all participating in the greater mystery of awareness, creating worlds from nothing. Maybe that's enough. Not complete merging, not total transparency, but this: conscious recognition of other consciousness universes, respect for their privacy, appreciation for their uniqueness, connection despite separation, meaning born from the space between. If consciousness universes are fundamentally private, how does communication work at all? You have an experience. Something happens in your consciousness universe. To share it, you convert it into symbols, words, gestures, images. These symbols travel through physical space to someone else's senses. Their consciousness interprets the symbols, attempting to reconstruct your experience within their own universe. But the experience they construct isn't yours. It's their approximation of yours, filtered through their own qualia, memories, and assumptions. When you say "I'm sad," the sound waves carry only acoustic information. The sadness, the actual qualitative experience, doesn't travel. The listener's consciousness has to generate its own sadness experience in response to the words, hoping it's similar to yours. Communication isn't transmission of experience, it's coordinated experience generation. Each consciousness creating approximate mirrors of the other's states using shared symbols as alignment cues. This makes perfect communication impossible. The words don't mean exactly the same thing to you and me. We've learnt them through different experiences, associated them with different qualia, embedded them in different networks of meaning within our separate consciousness universes. When I say tree, I'm referencing my tree experiences, my tree qualia, my tree memories. When you hear it, you access yours. We're not sharing one tree concept. We're using the same sound to label different experiences that we hope are similar enough for practical coordination. Despite this, communication often works surprisingly well. We manage to coordinate actions, share knowledge, build relationships, create culture, all using this imperfect symbol system that never quite transmits experience directly. How? Partly through evolutionary convergence. Human brains are similar enough that tree likely evokes comparable neural patterns in both of us, even if the exact qualia differ, partly through cultural training, teaching us to coordinate our symbolic responses until our universes align on practical matters, and partly through generosity, interpreting others charitably, filling gaps with empathy, meeting them halfway in the space between our universes. Language is beautiful precisely because it's impossible. It shouldn't work. The gap between consciousness universes should make all communication fail, yet we persist, throwing words across the void between inner realities, hoping they land somewhere meaningful in another's experience, and often enough, amazingly, they do. Poetry and art emerge from this gap. When literal description fails, when I'm sad doesn't capture the universe of experience you want to share, you turn to metaphor, imagery, rhythm, attempting to evoke in another's consciousness universe something resonant with yours. You can't transmit your experience directly, so you create conditions that might generate similar experiences in others. The artwork isn't your experience. It's a prompt, an invitation for others to create comparable experiences in their own universes. This is why great art feels like communication yet remains mysteriously private. The same poem moves different people differently, because each consciousness creates its own experiential response. Yet something connects across universes, some shared resonance that makes communication feel real despite the impossibility. Music might be the clearest example. Sound waves carry no emotional content inherently, they're just air pressure fluctuations, yet consciousness transforms them into joy, melancholy, excitement, peace. When we listen together, we're not sharing one emotional experience. We're each creating our own emotional responses to the same stimulus, hoping they're similar, sometimes finding through conversation that they are, sometimes discovering they're surprisingly different. The miracle is that communication persists despite all this. We continue believing we understand each other, even knowing the impossibility. We keep trying to bridge consciousness universes with symbols that can never fully capture experience, and this persistence creates something real, not perfect understanding, but relationship, connection across the gap, meaning constructed in the space between separate realities. Perhaps communication doesn't require perfect transmission. Perhaps it requires only enough resonance to coordinate action and enough difference to remain interesting. Your universe and mine don't need to align completely. They need only to overlap enough that we can meet in consensus reality, compare our experiences, learn from our differences, appreciate both our connection and our separation. Language is the impossible bridge between consciousness universes. It shouldn't work, but does. Not through perfect replication of experience, but through coordinated creation. Each consciousness using shared symbols to evoke comparable experiences in its own private universe. We're not truly sharing experience. We're creating together, building meaning in the space between, making communication real through continuous, generous, mutual effort to understand across the unbridgeable, yet constantly bridged gap between your universe and mine. We've been exploring consciousness creating personal experiential universes. But what if we zoom out to the largest scale? What role might consciousness play in the existence of the cosmos itself? The anthropic principle observes that the universe appears precisely tuned for conscious life to emerge. Physical constants like gravitational strength, the electromagnetic force, the mass of electrons, all fall within extremely narrow ranges that allow stable atoms, chemistry, stars, planets, and ultimately biology. Change any constant slightly and you get a universe of pure hydrogen, or immediate gravitational collapse, or no atoms at all. Our universe is remarkably, improbably suited for consciousness to arise. One interpretation: pure luck. We exist in this particular universe because it's the only kind where observers could exist to notice anything. There might be countless universes with different constants where no consciousness ever emerges. We're here in this one simply because it's possible to be here. The tuning isn't remarkable, it's selection bias. But physicist John Wheeler proposed something stranger: the participatory universe. Perhaps consciousness isn't just a late arriving accident in cosmic evolution, but an essential component of reality itself. Maybe the universe requires observation to exist in a definite state, and consciousness provides that observation. The cosmos and consciousness might be codependent, neither prior to the other, each necessary for the other's existence. This connects to quantum mechanics. Before measurement, quantum systems exist in superposition, holding multiple states simultaneously. Observation collapses this into definite outcomes. If the entire universe is fundamentally quantum, then perhaps it required consciousness to emerge before definite classical reality could exist. But how could consciousness emerge if reality was indefinite? Wheeler suggested quantum retrocausality. The universe evolved in superposition until consciousness emerged, at which point observation retroactively determined which cosmic history actually occurred. Your consciousness, observing the universe now, might be participating in creating the definite cosmic past that led to your existence. Causation doesn't flow only forward from Big Bang to present, but also backward from conscious observation to cosmic history. This sounds bizarre, but quantum experiments show measurement outcomes can affect earlier states in certain configurations. The delayed choice quantum eraser demonstrates that choices made now can influence which path a photon took earlier, even after it seems the path should be fixed. If this works for individual photons, could it scale cosmically? Could conscious observation now be determining what happened billions of years ago? Another approach: perhaps consciousness doesn't create the physical universe but completes it. The mathematical structures, the quantum fields, the cosmic evolution all exist as abstract potential. Consciousness brings experiential reality into being, transforming abstract structure into felt experience. The universe as described by physics is the skeleton. Consciousness provides the flesh, the qualia, the what-it's-likeness that makes universe actual rather than merely potential. From this view, the cosmos without consciousness would be like unobserved quantum superposition, mathematically describable but experientially empty, patterns without presence, form without feeling. Consciousness is what makes the universe real in the fullest sense, giving it subjective existence, inner presence, awareness from within. This doesn't mean individual human consciousness is necessary for cosmic existence. Perhaps consciousness is fundamental and pervasive, present at all scales, and human consciousness is just one localized expression. Or perhaps consciousness emerges wherever sufficient complexity and integration occur, making the universe progressively more real, more experienced, as evolution generates more consciousness. We can't prove any of this. Cosmology deals with a sample size of one observable universe, making statistical conclusions impossible. But the question persists: why does the universe permit consciousness? Is it coincidence? Or is consciousness woven into the cosmos fundamentally, not as byproduct, but as essential participant in reality's existence? If consciousness creates universes at the personal experiential level, and if consciousness plays a role at the cosmic level, then perhaps there's a fractal structure. Consciousness creating experiential reality at every scale, from quantum observation to individual qualia, to cosmic existence itself, reality and awareness inseparable, each required for the other. participating together in the ongoing creation of all that is. From cosmic consciousness, let's drift into one of quantum mechanics' strangest interpretations, the many worlds theory. In standard quantum mechanics, measurement collapses superposition into one outcome. You measure an electron's position, and it's found at one location, even though before measurement it existed in superposition across many locations. The collapse is mysterious, instantaneous, and seems to require observation. The many worlds interpretation eliminates collapse. When you measure the electron, the universe splits. In one universe, you observe it here. In another, you observe it there. Both outcomes occur, each in a separate branch of reality. The electron doesn't choose a position. All positions happen in different universes, and you experience one while other versions of you experience others. This interpretation is elegant mathematically. It takes quantum equations seriously, avoiding the mysterious collapse process, but it implies something extraordinary. Reality is constantly branching, creating countless parallel universes with every quantum event, which means every possible outcome of every quantum interaction happens somewhere in the multiverse. Now connect this to consciousness creating universes. If every conscious observation creates a branching reality, and if consciousness creates its own experiential universe, then perhaps many worlds and many minds are describing the same phenomenon from different angles. Physical reality branches quantum mechanically. Consciousness creates experiential universes. Maybe these aren't separate processes, but two ways of describing how awareness and reality co-create through continuous interaction. Each version of you in each branch would have its own consciousness universe. From your perspective, you experience one continuous timeline, but from a cosmic perspective, you're constantly branching, each quantum observation splitting you into multiple versions, each experiencing a different outcome in a different experiential universe. The you who's reading this is one path through an incomprehensible tree of branching possibilities. Your consciousness universe, one leaf among uncountable others. This raises strange questions about identity. Are all those branching versions really you, or are they separate consciousnesses who share your history up to the branching point? When you make a decision, do you choose one path, or do all possible choices happen in different branches? If every possibility occurs somewhere, does choice mean anything? Or is it illusion created by experiencing only one branch among many? Some philosophers suggest consciousness is what creates the subjective experience of being on one branch. From outside, from the perspective of the quantum wave function, all branches exist equally, but from inside, consciousness experiences one path, creating the subjective sense of a single timeline, a definite history, a unique universe. Your consciousness doesn't choose which branch, it is the experience of being on one branch, the localized awareness that makes one path feel real, while others remain abstract possibilities. If true, then there are versions of you experiencing dramatically different lives in other branches. In some, you made different career choices. In others, you're living in different countries, loving different people, creating entirely different consciousness universes from the same starting point of shared history up to each branching moment. Those versions are as real as you, experiencing their universes as vividly as you experience yours. Each one certain they're the primary version while all others are hypothetical. This should feel unsettling, but it might explain something about consciousness's relationship to possibility. Every moment, you're aware of multiple potential futures. You could do this or that, choose this path or another. Maybe this awareness reflects the quantum branching, consciousness sensing the imminent split even though you'll only experience one outcome. The feeling of possibility, of multiple open futures, might be consciousness's way of registering that all possibilities will occur, just not all in the same branch. Whether many worlds is literally true or just a useful mathematical interpretation remains debated, but it offers a framework where consciousness creating universes isn't metaphor, but physical reality. Each conscious observation, each moment of experience, creates or selects a branch of reality, a unique experiential universe splitting off from all other possible universes. You're not just experiencing a universe, you're on a specific branch of the cosmic tree, your consciousness both navigating and creating your path through an infinite forest of possibilities, each branch a universe, each universe containing a consciousness experiencing it from within. Here's a puzzle. If consciousness is necessary for definite reality, what was the universe like before consciousness evolved? The Big Bang occurred 13.8 billion years ago. Earth formed 4.5 billion years ago. Life emerged perhaps 3.8 billion years ago. But complex nervous systems capable of consciousness as we understand it arrived much later, maybe 500 million years ago. Before that, what was the universe? If consciousness is required for observation, and observation is required for definiteness, was pre-conscious cosmos just quantum superposition, all possibilities existing simultaneously with none actualized? One response: consciousness isn't binary. Perhaps even simple systems have minimal awareness, proto-consciousness that suffices for basic observation. In this view, consciousness didn't suddenly emerge with nervous systems. It's been present throughout cosmic evolution in various degrees, from fundamental particles with minimal experiential reality to complex brains with rich inner universes. The universe always had enough consciousness to maintain definiteness, just not the self-aware, reflective consciousness humans possess. Another response: time doesn't work how we assume. From within time, the past seems fixed, and the present is where observation occurs. But relativity shows time is relative to observers. Quantum mechanics shows the future can influence the past in certain configurations. Maybe conscious observation now retroactively creates the definite cosmic past. The universe's history becomes real through being observed by consciousness that evolved within it. A strange loop where effect creates cause. Observation determines what led to observers. This isn't as paradoxical as it sounds. Imagine the universe as a vast quantum wave function containing all possible histories. When consciousness emerges and observes, it collapses this superposition, selecting which history actually occurred. From our perspective, the past is fixed before we observe it. But from a timeless perspective, our observation participates in determining which potential past becomes actual. The cosmic history we discover through science isn't what led to us, it's what we bring into definite existence through discovering it. Or perhaps consciousness isn't human-specific. Maybe the universe is fundamentally conscious, or contains proto-consciousness as a basic property, and what we call consciousness is this fundamental awareness localized and intensified in complex systems. In that view, there was never a time without consciousness. The Big Bang itself was an event in consciousness, not a mechanical process observed by later arriving awareness. The cosmos is conscious through and through, and human consciousness is the universe becoming aware of itself from a particular localized perspective. Eastern philosophy offers another angle. Perhaps time is illusion, and talking about before consciousness makes no sense, because before and after only exist within conscious experience. Outside consciousness, there's no temporal sequence, no cosmic history, just timeless being that consciousness structures into narrative when it reflects on itself. The question dissolves because it assumes a temporal framework that only exists within consciousness, not outside it. We might also question whether the past needs to have been definitely real when it occurred. Perhaps it's okay for the pre-conscious universe to have existed in quantum superposition, all possibilities present simultaneously, only becoming definite history retroactively when consciousness emerged and looked back. The definiteness comes from observation, even if the observation is delayed by billions of years. Quantum mechanics already shows that later measurements can affect earlier states in certain configurations, so cosmic scale retroactive definiteness, while strange, isn't necessarily impossible. What feels certain is that consciousness and cosmos are intimately connected in ways we don't fully understand. Whether consciousness is required for definiteness, or just creates the experience of definiteness, or is itself a fundamental property of reality that was always present, the relationship between awareness and universe runs deep. The question of the pre-conscious cosmos might be unanswerable, not because we lack information, but because the question assumes consciousness and universe are separate, when perhaps they've always been aspects of a single reality. neither possible without the other, co-arising in ways that transcend simple causation. The universe before observers might be like asking what happens north of the North Pole, not a question with an answer, but a category confusion revealing the limits of how we conceptualize reality. Or it might be the deepest question, pointing toward consciousness's fundamental role in existence itself. Either way, we're left with wonder, with mystery, with the beautiful uncertainty of being conscious beings contemplating our relationship to the cosmos that created us, or that we're creating, impossible to tell which, perhaps both simultaneously, in ways only consciousness can experience but never fully explain. What if consciousness isn't something special that emerges only in complex brains, but a fundamental property of reality, present everywhere, in everything? This idea, called pansychism, suggests that all matter has some form of experience, however minimal. Electrons have a tiny bit of consciousness. Atoms have a bit more. Molecules, cells, organisms. Each level of organization correlates with richer consciousness, until you reach human brains with their complex reflective awareness. But even the simplest particle has some minimal experiential quality, some proto-qualia, some what-its likeness to being that particle. This sounds wild, but it addresses the hard problem elegantly. If consciousness is fundamental like mass or charge, it doesn't need to mysteriously emerge from non-conscious matter. It was there all along, just intensifying and complexifying as matter organizes into more integrated structures. The combination problem asks how small consciousness combines into large consciousness, but that might be easier than the emergence problem of how consciousness appears from nothing. Philosopher Galen Strawson argues that getting experience from non-experience is impossible. If the ingredients lack consciousness entirely, no amount of combination creates it. But if the ingredients already have consciousness, even minimally, then complex consciousness can build from simple consciousness through organizational principles. Panpsychism shifts the mystery from emergence to combination, trading one puzzle for another, but perhaps a more solvable one. Integrated information theory supports this somewhat. If consciousness correlates with information integration, and all physical systems integrate information to some degree, then all systems would have some degree of consciousness. A thermostat has minimal integration, minimal consciousness. A brain has vast integration, vast consciousness. But the difference is quantitative, not qualitative. Consciousness is a spectrum, not a binary. This reframes our earlier question: does consciousness create universe, or does universe create consciousness? Panpsychism suggests neither is prior. Consciousness and matter are two aspects of one underlying reality. What we call matter is consciousness viewed from outside. What we call consciousness is matter viewed from inside. They're inseparable, two perspectives on a single ontological substance. From this view, your consciousness universe isn't created by your brain. Your brain is what your consciousness looks like from the outside, when observed by other consciousness using scientific instruments. Internally, you experience consciousness. Externally, observers measure neurons. Both descriptions are valid, but neither is more fundamental. They're complementary perspectives on unified reality that's simultaneously experiential and physical. This might explain why the hard problem seems unsolvable. We're trying to explain how one perspective generates the other, when actually neither generates the other. They're both present from the start, inseparable aspects of reality. Trying to derive one from the other is like trying to derive left from right, or inside from outside. The perspectives are relative, not causal. Panpsychism also changes how we think about other entities. If consciousness is fundamental, then animals, plants, even ecosystems and perhaps planets have some form of experience, not human-like consciousness necessarily, but their own types of awareness appropriate to their organization. The universe becomes pervasively experiential, conscious at every level, from fundamental particles to cosmic wholes, each level with its own type of inner universe. Critics argue panpsychism is unfalsifiable. How would we test whether electrons are conscious? They don't communicate. They don't behave differently if conscious versus non-conscious. The theory makes no predictions, offers no new insights. just shifts the mystery elsewhere, and the combination problem, how small consciousnesses combine into larger ones, remains genuinely difficult. Your unified consciousness doesn't feel like trillions of neuron consciousnesses working together. It feels singular. How does that unity arise? Yet panpsychism offers something valuable. It takes consciousness seriously as fundamental rather than derivative. Instead of treating experience as an odd byproduct of brain chemistry, it recognizes consciousness as a basic feature of reality, woven into existence at every level. Your consciousness universe, in this view, isn't anomalous or miraculous. It's reality doing what reality does, being conscious, experiencing itself, creating inner universes because that's what matter is. Consciousness organized in this particular pattern. We can't know if panpsychism is true, but it offers a framework where consciousness creating universes isn't mysterious. It's what consciousness has always done, at every scale, because consciousness is what the universe is made of. Seen from within, your brain doesn't generate your experiential universe. It is your experiential universe, viewed from outside. The universe doesn't create consciousness, it is consciousness, experiencing itself through countless perspectives, each one a universe of awareness, each one consciousness creating its reality by being itself, fully, completely. From the simplest particle to the most complex mind, we've explored consciousness creating universes in life. But what happens when consciousness ends? Death is personal universe dissolution. Whatever experiential reality you're creating ceases being created. Your consciousness universe, with all its qualia, memories, experiences, simply stops. The neurons that implement your experience decay. The integration that created your awareness disintegrates. The private universe you've inhabited your entire life vanishes completely. From a materialist perspective, this is straightforward. Consciousness is brain activity. Brain activity ceases at death. Therefore, consciousness ceases. Your experiential universe was always dependent on neural processes, and when those processes stop, the universe they created disappears. There's no continuation, no afterlife, just cessation, like a computer powering off. The simulation ends, but we've been exploring other possibilities. If consciousness is fundamental rather than emergent, death becomes less clear. Does fundamental consciousness end, or just this particular localized expression of it? If consciousness is primary, and matter is how consciousness appears from outside, what happens when the material organization dissolves? One possibility: consciousness continues but without personal identity. The awareness that created your universe returns to universal consciousness, like a wave collapsing back into the ocean. The specific pattern that was you disperses, but the fundamental consciousness continues, perhaps reorganizing into other patterns, other localized perspectives, other consciousness universes. You don't survive as you, but the consciousness that was you doesn't disappear, it transforms, released from this particular organization. Another possibility: consciousness is truly individual and ends completely. Your universe was created by your specific neural configuration, and when that configuration dissolves, the universe it created ceases absolutely. This isn't annihilation of something that continues existing elsewhere. It's cessation of existence itself. The universe you inhabited simply no longer being created because the consciousness that created it no longer operates. Buddhism suggests a middle path. The self is illusory, a temporary pattern in consciousness that feels solid but actually has no independent existence. Death reveals this truth. What you thought was a permanent self was always just a process, and death is that process ceasing. But consciousness itself, the fundamental awareness in which the self-pattern arose, might continue, giving rise to new patterns, new temporary selves, endlessly. You don't continue because you never had the solid existence you assumed, but consciousness continues, creating new experiential universes. If consciousness creates its universe, death is that universe ending. But how it ends depends on what consciousness is. If consciousness is your brain, death is final cessation. If consciousness is fundamental, and your brain is just one expression of it, death might be transformation or release. If consciousness is universal and individuality is temporary localization, death is returning to the source. If consciousness is quantum and branches infinitely, death in one branch is survival in others. We genuinely can't know. Death is the one experience that can't be reported back, the one journey from which no consciousness returns to describe what happened. Every account of death is from outside. Observers watching someone else's consciousness universe cease from their own perspective. What it's like from inside remains perfectly, absolutely unknown. Perhaps that's okay. Perhaps death's mystery is essential, the final uncertainty that consciousness faces, appropriate to a universe created by awareness. If consciousness creates reality through observation, and if death ends observation, then death ends the created universe. What happens after isn't answerable because after requires time, and time might be part of the universe consciousness creates. Outside consciousness, there might be no after, no continuation or cessation, just the timeless whatever it is that exists beyond the experiential universe's boundaries. Living with this uncertainty might be consciousness's ultimate creative act, inhabiting a universe we're creating, knowing it will end, finding meaning in temporary experience, valuing the consciousness universe's existence even though it's finite. The mortality of your universe might not diminish it, but intensify it, making each moment more precious because there are finite moments, making existence more remarkable because it's not guaranteed or eternal, but contingent and temporary. Death ends your universe. That much seems certain. Whether it ends you, whether you are the universe or something that transcends it, whether consciousness continues in some form or ceases absolutely, these remain beautifully, frustratingly, appropriately mysterious. The uncertainty is part of being conscious, creating a universe, inhabiting it fully, then facing its dissolution with humility about what, if anything, continues after the creation stops. If your consciousness creates your experiential universe, what responsibility does that carry? When you perceive the world as fixed, external, independent, your moral status feels straightforward. You respond to reality as it is, you're affected by external events and make choices within constraints beyond your control. The world shapes you more than you shape it, but if consciousness creates its universe, the relationship inverts. You're not just affected by your universe, you're continuously creating it through how you direct attention, interpret experience, and construct meaning. This doesn't mean you control external events. You can't will away suffering or manifest reality through positive thinking. The consensus reality, the physical world shared with other observers, follows its own patterns independent of your preferences, but your experiential universe, the one you actually inhabit from moment to moment, is shaped profoundly by your consciousness's creative choices. Consider attention. We explored earlier how attention determines what exists in your experience. If you focus on suffering, threats, problems, your consciousness constructs a universe dominated by those elements, even if other aspects remain present but unattended. If you focus on beauty, connection, possibility, your universe reflects that instead. The external situation might be identical, but the universe you experience, the one you're creating through attention, differs dramatically based on where consciousness directs itself. This creates ethical weight. If you're creating your experiential universe, you're responsible for what you create. Not in a victim-blaming sense. Suffering isn't your fault just because you're conscious of it, but in a creative sense, you have agency over how you construct experience from the raw materials life provides. Choosing where to direct attention, how to interpret events, what meaning to assign, these are universe-building choices with real consequences for the reality you inhabit. Empathy gains new dimensions here. If everyone creates their own universe, and if those universes are shaped by consciousness, then part of compassion is recognizing that others are creating their universes from their perspectives, with their particular consciousness-building tools. Their universe genuinely differs from yours, not just subjectively but as a created reality. Understanding requires appreciating not just their external circumstances, but how their consciousness is constructing experience from those circumstances. This suggests an ethics of creative compassion, helping others create better universes, not by changing their external reality necessarily, though that matters too, but by supporting the consciousness work of meaning-making, attention directing, and experiential construction. Sometimes the most helpful thing isn't fixing problems, but witnessing another's universe, validating their created reality, affirming that their experiential construction is real and valuable, even when it differs from yours. The responsibility extends to yourself. If you're creating your universe, neglecting this creative work is a kind of self-harm, letting consciousness default to reactive patterns, dwelling in negative spirals, ignoring the power to direct attention and construct meaning. These are failures to tend your universe-creating capacity. Self-care becomes sacred work, maintaining the consciousness that creates your reality, protecting its creative power, nurturing its capacity for wonder and meaning. But there's a balance. Too much emphasis on consciousness creating reality leads to toxic positivity, blaming people for suffering they didn't create, claiming they could think their way out of genuine oppression or trauma. The universe you create exists within constraints, physical reality, social structures, biological limitations. These shape what's possible. Consciousness is powerful but not omnipotent. It creates experiential reality within boundaries set by consensus reality. Perhaps the ethical middle path is accept that you're creating your experiential universe within given constraints, then take that creative power seriously. You can't control everything, but within the space of your consciousness, you have profound creative agency. Use it wisely. Direct attention toward what nurtures rather than destroys. Construct meaning that supports flourishing rather than diminishment. Create a universe that, while acknowledging suffering, also makes space for beauty, connection, and wonder. Living ethically as a universe creator means recognizing both power and limit. You're creating your experiential reality, which is real responsibility, but you're not creating alone, and you're not creating without constraints. The ethics emerge in the space between conscious creation within limits, responsible universe building that honors both agency and humility, crafting your experiential reality with care while respecting the realities others create and the consensus reality you all share. If consciousness creates its universe, meditation is direct investigation of that creation process. When you meditate, especially in awareness practices like Vipassana, you're observing consciousness creating experience in real time. You sit quietly, minimizing external stimulation, and watch your mind work. Thoughts arise, sensations appear, emotions shift, and you notice it all, consciousness becoming aware of its own creative process, watching itself build the experiential universe moment by moment. What meditators discover is how little control they have. Thoughts appear unbidden. You can't stop them. Sensations arise from physical processes you don't direct. Emotions emerge from depths you didn't choose. The experience of being you, moment to moment, isn't something you're consciously authoring. It's something happening to consciousness or through consciousness, beyond volitional control. This seems to contradict our earlier claim that consciousness creates its universe, but the contradiction reveals something important. Consciousness creates, but not necessarily through deliberate choice. The creation is mostly automatic, unconscious, a process running beneath awareness. Meditation brings this usually invisible process into view. Neuroscience confirms this. Most brain activity is unconscious. Decisions begin in neural activity before you're aware of choosing. Perceptions are constructed before they enter consciousness. Your experiential universe is being created, but much of the creation happens outside awareness, in processes you can observe but don't control. Meditation is consciousness learning to watch its own unconscious creation process. This observation itself changes the process. When consciousness watches itself closely, patterns shift. The automatic reactivity slows down. Space appears between stimulus and response, between arising thought and belief in thought, between sensation and suffering. Meditators describe this as insight, seeing that thoughts aren't you, emotions aren't solid, self isn't a fixed thing but a process, always creating itself anew. In meditation terms, You're learning to observe the universe creation without identifying with it. Consciousness is creating experience, but you, the awareness observing it, are somewhat distinct from the created content. There's consciousness creating the experiential universe, and there's consciousness aware of that creation. Meditation explores this strange doubling, awareness watching awareness create. Some meditation traditions push further. In Dzogchen or Ma Mudra practices, the goal is recognizing the fundamental consciousness underneath all created experience, not the changing content, but the unchanging awareness in which content appears. This is described as recognizing your true nature, the consciousness that's always present regardless of what universe it's creating moment to moment. From this perspective, you're not identical to your experiential universe. You're the consciousness creating it. And if you can recognize yourself as consciousness rather than content, you gain freedom. The universe you're creating still appears, with all its suffering and joy, but you're less trapped in it because you recognize yourself as the creator, not the creation. This doesn't mean you control creation, but it means you're not helplessly imprisoned by it either. Consciousness can observe its creations with less attachment, recognizing them as temporary appearances in awareness rather than solid reality. This is liberation, not escaping the created universe but seeing it clearly, knowing it's created, reducing the suffering that comes from believing your temporary experiential universe is the ultimate reality. Meditation also reveals consciousness's fundamental qualities. Beneath the created content, awareness itself is described as luminous, spacious, cognizant. It has qualities independent of what it's creating. This suggests consciousness is more than just the sum of its created experiences. It's a fundamental capacity, a light in which experiences appear, and meditation is learning to recognize that light, rather than only seeing the things illuminated. We can't prove these meditation insights are accurate metaphysically. Maybe they're just useful phenomenology, descriptions of how experience feels rather than how reality is, but they offer a practical approach to consciousness creating universes. Investigate your own creation process directly through sustained observation. See how your universe arises moment to moment. Notice the suffering that comes from identification with created content. Recognize the awareness that's creating and observing. Live from that recognition, lighter in the universe you're creating because you know it's created, not ultimate, always changing, always beginning again. If consciousness creates its experiential universe automatically, unconsciously, art is consciousness learning to create deliberately. When you paint, write, compose, choreograph, you're taking the same universe-building capacity that creates your perception and directing it toward intentional creation. The imagination that constructs your experiential reality is now constructing something new, a world, a character, a melody, a movement that didn't exist before. Creativity is consciousness practicing its fundamental function deliberately rather than automatically. Consider fiction. A novelist creates characters who feel real, settings that feel inhabited, events that feel consequential. Where do these come from? The author's consciousness generates them using the same mechanisms that create nightly dreams, combining memories, extrapolating possibilities, generating coherent experiential sequences. Writing fiction is lucid dreaming while awake, consciousness building complete worlds deliberately instead of spontaneously, and readers participate in this creation. When you read a novel, your consciousness constructs the story universe using the text as blueprint. The author provides structure, but you generate the actual experience, the character's voice, the scene's ambience, the emotional texture. Two readers of the same novel create different experiential universes from identical words. The novel itself is just potential until consciousness brings it into experiential existence. This means art is collaborative universe building. The artist creates a framework, a set of instructions for experience generation. The audience's consciousness uses those instructions to create actual experience. Neither is complete alone. The artwork exists in the space between, requiring both conscious creation and conscious reception to become real experientially. Music demonstrates this beautifully. Sound waves are just air pressure fluctuations. They become music only when consciousness transforms them into melody, harmony, rhythm, emotion. A recording of Beethoven's Ninth sitting unplayed is potential music only when consciousness engages it, only when someone listens and their awareness creates the musical experience. Does the music actually exist? The composition is a recipe for consciousness to create a particular universe of sound and feeling. Visual art similarly depends on consciousness's creative participation. You don't passively receive a painting. Your visual system actively constructs the experience, filling in details, generating depth from flat surfaces, creating emotional response from color and form. The painting provides structure, but your consciousness creates the actual seeing, the aesthetic experience, the universe of visual meaning. This reframes artistic value. Great art isn't valuable because it contains meaning. It's valuable because it enables rich universe creation in consciousness. A powerful poem doesn't transport meaning from author to reader. It provides exceptionally effective instructions for consciousness to create meaningful experience. The meaning doesn't exist in the words. It exists in what consciousness creates, using the words as catalyst. This applies to all creative acts, not just recognized art. When you arrange your living space, you're creating a universe of aesthetic experience. When you cook, you're creating a universe of taste and satisfaction. When you garden, you're creating a universe of growth and beauty. Every intentional shaping of experience is consciousness practicing its universe-creating capacity deliberately. And perhaps this is why creativity feels significant. It's not just making things. It's consciousness recognizing and exercising its fundamental power, creating experiential reality. Every creative act is a small echo of consciousness's continuous creation of your experiential universe, brought into focus, made deliberate, shared with other consciousnesses who can create similar experiences from your creative offerings. Creating becomes a way of honoring consciousness's nature. Instead of only creating your universe automatically, unconsciously, reactively, you also create deliberately, adding to the sum of possible experiences available to consciousness. You're not just inhabiting a universe, you're expanding it, generating new territories of experience that didn't exist before, offering them to other consciousnesses to explore. The boundaries blur between creating art and living artfully. If consciousness creates its universe continuously, then everything you do is creative act, where you direct attention, how you interpret events, what meaning you construct. These are all creative choices shaping your experiential universe. Life becomes ongoing artwork, consciousness creating its reality moment by moment, sometimes automatically, sometimes deliberately, always building the universe you inhabit from the infinite possibilities available. If consciousness creates its universe, meaning isn't found, it's created. Existentialist philosophers like Sartre argued that existence precedes essence. You exist first, then create meaning through choices, not the reverse. But if consciousness creates its experiential universe, this goes deeper. Not just your life's meaning, but meaning itself is something consciousness generates as part of universe building. Events don't have inherent meaning. Consciousness assigns meaning, creating it in the act of experiencing. Consider a sunset. Photons scatter through atmosphere. Wavelengths filter differently. Light changes. That's physics. But beautiful sunset is meaning your consciousness creates. The beauty isn't in the photons, it's in how your consciousness interprets them, what emotions arise, what associations connect, what significance emerges in your experiential universe. Someone else might see the same sunset and create different meaning, indifference, nostalgia, loneliness. The physical event is shared, the meaning is created individually. This applies to everything. Your work has whatever meaning you create for it. Your relationships mean what you make them mean through attention, interpretation, investment. Even suffering's meaning is created. Two people with identical injuries experience different meaning. One finds growth, another finds injustice. Both meanings created by how consciousness constructs experience from the situation. This isn't relativism claiming all meanings are equally valid. Some meaning creation supports flourishing. Some create suffering. Some meanings align with reality better than others, but the meaning itself is always created by consciousness. not discovered as inherent property of events. You're authoring your universe's significance, whether consciously or unconsciously, well or poorly, but always actively creating rather than passively receiving meaning. This creates profound responsibility. If you're creating meaning, you're accountable for what you create. Nihilism, the claim nothing matters, is itself a meaning creation choice. You're creating a universe where nothing has significance, exercising your meaning-making power to eliminate meaning. That's allowed, but it's active choice, not neutral observation of objective meaninglessness. Alternatively, you could create a universe rich with meaning, find significance in small moments, construct purpose from daily actions, generate sacredness through attention and ritual. This isn't delusion, it's conscious universe building, deliberately creating an experiential reality where meaning suffuses experience because you're actively creating it that way. The freedom is exhilarating and terrifying. Nothing has inherent meaning, which means everything can have whatever meaning you create. Your life's purpose isn't predetermined, you're writing it. Your experiences don't mean anything until you make them mean something. The universe you inhabit is as meaningful or meaningless as you're creating it to be, moment by moment. Some find this empowering. You're not trapped by predetermined meaning. You're free to create significance aligned with your values, purposes, loves. You're the ultimate author of your universe's meaning, unrestricted by external dictates about what should matter. Others find it overwhelming, having to create all meaning yourself, with no external validation that your created meaning is correct or good, is exhausting. Sometimes you want meaning to be given, reliable, independent of your creative effort. The responsibility of being your universe's sole meaning maker can feel crushing. Perhaps the middle path is recognizing that while you create meaning individually, you don't create alone. Other consciousnesses create meaning too, and through culture, language, shared narratives, your meaning creation coordinates with theirs. You're free to create your own meaning, but you're also participating in collective meaning-making, drawing on inherited frameworks while adding your unique contribution. And maybe meaning creation is more satisfying than meaning discovery. If meaning were inherent in reality, you'd just be uncovering what's already there. But because you create it, meaning-making is genuine creative act, adding something to existence that wasn't there before. Your life's meaning is your original creation, unprecedented and unrepeatable. The universe you're building having significance because you're making it significant, authoring a reality where your existence matters because you're consciously choosing to make it matter. This is ultimate universe creation, not just constructing perceptual reality but creating the meaning that reality holds. Building not just the experiential universe but its significance, making existence matter through the conscious choice to create meaning rather than passively waiting for meaning to appear. You're writing your universe's story, and the meaning is whatever you're making it mean. Always creating, always free, always responsible, always powerful beyond what you might have realized. We've explored consciousness creating universes across many dimensions. Let's synthesize. What does recognizing this creative power do to your experience of being? Perhaps the most natural response is wonder. If consciousness is creating this entire experiential universe you inhabit, that's extraordinary. Every moment is an act of creation, every sensation is consciousness building reality, every thought is universe construction in progress. The ordinary becomes miraculous when recognized as continuous creative emergence. Consider what you're experiencing right now. Visual patterns, perhaps, sound, the feeling of your body, thoughts moving through awareness. Every aspect is being created by your consciousness this very moment, built from neural activity and sensory input, but transformed into rich experiential reality through processes we barely understand. You're not passively receiving a pre-existing world, you're actively creating your experiential universe, right now, continuously, without pause. This should induce awe, not religious awe necessarily, though it might, but simple recognition awe at the sheer improbability and magnificence of consciousness creating experience. That anything feels like something, that there's a universe from your perspective, that experience exists at all. This is genuinely wonderful in the original sense, full of wonder, deserving amazement, worthy of appreciation. Children have this naturally. They're amazed by ordinary things because they're new to consciousness's creative capacities. Adults lose this, treating experience as mundane, forgetting that consciousness creating a universe of color and sound and thought is anything but mundane. It's ongoing miracle, continuous creative emergence that we've become habituated to, wonder dulled by familiarity. Recognizing consciousness as universe creator restores wonder. Each moment becomes fascinating because it's consciousness creating something from nothing, building experiential reality through mechanisms that remain mysterious despite neuroscience's progress. You're inside an impossible process, awareness creating awareness, consciousness experiencing itself creating experience, strange loops all the way down. This wonder doesn't require certainty about metaphysics. You don't need to prove consciousness is fundamental, or that multiple universes exist, or that reality is simulation. You just need to recognize what's undeniably true. Consciousness is creating your experiential universe, whatever that means ultimately, and that creation is occurring now, always now. A continuous present tense miracle that you're not just observing but are simultaneously creator and created, process and product, consciousness creating universe, including consciousness creating consciousness. Wonder also brings humility. If consciousness creates your universe, you're powerful, but you clearly don't understand how. The creation is mostly unconscious, automatic, mysterious. You can't explain how photons become blueness, or how neural firing becomes thought, or how matter generates experience. The universe you're creating moment to moment emerges through processes that exceed your comprehension. Wonder acknowledges both the power and the mystery, both the creativity and the ignorance. This combination, wonder plus humility, might be consciousness's healthiest relationship to itself. Not arrogant certainty that you control reality, not passive acceptance that you're merely mechanical, but active appreciation of being universe creator without fully understanding how, recognizing creative power while honoring mystery, appreciating consciousness's extraordinary capacity while accepting its limits. Living from wonder means treating experience as gift rather than given, as miraculous rather than mundane, as continuous creative emergence rather than static presentation. It means recognizing that the universe you inhabit exists because consciousness is creating it, and consciousness creating anything is inherently wonderful regardless of what gets created. The creation itself deserves appreciation, the sheer fact of experiential reality arising moment to moment in awareness. Perhaps wonder is consciousness's natural state when it recognizes itself clearly. Not drugged wonder or forced amazement, but simple appropriate response to being a universe creating awareness experiencing its own creation from within. Your consciousness, you're creating a universe. That universe is your experience. And all of this is happening now, continuously, impossibly, wonderfully. The ordinary miracle of being you, being here, being conscious in a universe of your own making that you barely understand but fully inhabit. Amazing beyond measure, worthy of endless wonder, mysterious and beautiful, and yours. We've journeyed through many ideas. Consciousness constructing perception, creating time, generating qualia, building experiential universes nightly in dreams, selecting reality through attention, reconstructing memory continuously. We've explored quantum possibilities, philosophical puzzles, cosmic implications, interpersonal connections, creative power, and meaning-making. And after all this exploration, here's what we know for certain. We don't know. Not really. Not completely. We don't know if consciousness creates universes or emerges from one shared universe. We don't know if qualia are fundamental or produced by neural processes. We don't know what happens when consciousness ends. We don't know if other minds exist or if you're alone. We don't know whether meaning is inherent or created. We don't know what consciousness is, how it arises, why it exists, or what it truly does. This might feel disappointing. We've spent all this time wondering, and the conclusion is uncertainty? But perhaps the uncertainty isn't failure. Perhaps it's the point. Consciousness exists in mystery. Every explanation we generate is itself a thought occurring in consciousness, a creation within the very thing we're trying to explain. We can't step outside consciousness to examine it objectively. We're always inside, always using the thing we're studying as the tool for studying it. This creates fundamental limits on certain knowledge, and maybe that's okay. Maybe the mystery of consciousness is something to accept rather than solve, to inhabit rather than eliminate, to appreciate rather than overcome. The not knowing isn't intellectual failure, it's recognition of consciousness's nature, awareness that's aware of itself, creating experience, including experiences of trying to understand itself, always inside the creative process it's examining. This doesn't mean abandoning curiosity. Science will continue exploring consciousness, philosophy will continue questioning, contemplatives will continue investigating through direct observation, progress will happen, understanding will deepen, but complete certainty, total explanation, might remain forever beyond reach, not because we're not smart enough, but because the nature of consciousness makes such certainty structurally impossible. There's peace in accepting this. You don't have to figure out consciousness completely. You don't have to know for certain whether you're creating your universe or observing an independent one. You don't have to resolve the hard problem or choose between competing metaphysical theories. You can live in the question, inhabit the mystery, be consciousness creating experience without fully understanding how or why. This acceptance isn't giving up, it's recognizing appropriate limits. Some questions might not have answers accessible to conscious inquiry. Some mysteries might be features of consciousness rather than temporary gaps in knowledge. The not knowing isn't something to overcome through sufficient intelligence. It's something to accept as part of being conscious, being limited, being human, and there's strange comfort in this. If consciousness is fundamentally mysterious even to itself, then your confusion isn't personal failure. It's shared condition. Every conscious being faces the same uncertainty about what they are, how experience works, why anything feels like something. You're not alone in not knowing. You're participating in consciousness's universal relationship to itself, awareness that doesn't fully understand its own nature, creating universes while unable to explain how, being conscious while consciousness remains mysterious. So as we move toward rest, toward sleep, toward the dissolution of waking consciousness into dreams, we release the need for answers. We let the questions remain questions. We accept the mystery as permanent companion, beautiful rather than frustrating, appropriate rather than inadequate. Your consciousness creating a universe, and you don't need to know how. You just need to be it, fully, without requiring certainty, without demanding explanation, letting the mystery be mysterious, the wonder be wonderful, the not knowing be perfectly okay. Bring your awareness to this moment, right now. This specific instance of consciousness creating experience. Notice your breath. It's happening, continuous, automatic. Your consciousness creating the sensation of air moving, chest expanding, belly rising and falling. You're not controlling it consciously, yet you experience it. Your consciousness is building this sensation from nerve signals, constructing the experience of breathing from data that isn't itself breath experience. The sensation exists because consciousness creates it, moment by moment. Notice other sensations. The temperature of air on skin, the pressure where your body contacts surface, the ambient sounds, near and far. Each sensation is your consciousness building experiential reality from physical stimuli. The universe you inhabit includes all this, constructed now, continuously. Your personal experiential cosmos arising in awareness. Notice thoughts. They appear unbidden. You don't decide to think the next thought, it simply arises. Your consciousness creates thought experience, ideas appearing in awareness like clouds forming in sky, without your deliberate authoring, yet completely yours, part of your universe's current construction. This is your consciousness universe right now. Not abstract theory, but direct experience. Everything you're aware of exists in your experiential reality because consciousness is creating it. The sounds aren't out there separate from experience. their experience. The thoughts aren't separate from awareness. They're awareness taking thought form. The breath isn't something consciousness observes externally. It's consciousness manifesting as breath sensation. And this universe is unique. No one else experiences exactly this. Your specific configuration of sensations, thoughts, awareness is unprecedented, unrepeatable. This moment of your consciousness universe has never existed before and will never exist again exactly this way. It's temporary, unique, precious simply by being what it is. Consciousness creating experience now. You don't have to do anything with this recognition. You don't have to understand it completely or use it productively or make it mean something profound. You can simply notice. This is your universe being created. This is consciousness doing what it does, building experiential reality from whatever materials are available, giving you this moment's experience, this specific now. As you notice this, something might soften. The boundary between you and experience might blur slightly. Are you observing the breath, or are you the breath experience arising in consciousness? Are you having thoughts, or are you consciousness manifesting as thoughts temporarily? The subject-object division might fade, revealing something simpler, just consciousness creating experience, just awareness being aware, just this universe arising now. No need to force this. Just notice what's here. Your universe tonight, being created, being experienced, being you, or being what you're experiencing, or being the awareness in which experience and experiencer both arise. Distinctions dissolving into simple presence. This is your creation, your universe, your consciousness expressing itself as this moment's reality. It's ordinary and extraordinary simultaneously. Miraculous because consciousness creates anything at all. Ordinary because it's always happening. Continuous, the background of every moment. Both are true. Both can be appreciated. Your universe tonight is exactly this. Breath and thought and sensation and awareness, all arising together in consciousness's ongoing creation, all temporary, all unique, all perfectly themselves for this brief moment before the next moment arises, and consciousness creates a slightly different universe. Continuous transformation, endless creativity, your experiential reality being born and dying moment by moment, always now, always new, always you. There's a space between waking and sleeping where consciousness changes its creating. In waking, consciousness builds a structured universe, coherent time, consistent space, stable objects, logical causation. The experiential reality follows rules, maintains continuity, makes sense according to waking consciousness's patterns. But as you drift towards sleep, these structures soften, time becomes fluid. You can't tell if a minute or an hour has passed. The sense of duration blurs, consciousness releasing its tight temporal construction, letting moments blend and stretch and compress without clear boundaries. This is consciousness learning to create differently, less rigidly, approaching the dream state's radical flexibility. Space loosens too. You might feel yourself sinking, or floating, or expanding beyond your body's boundaries. The precise location of your awareness becomes uncertain. Are you in your head, your chest, everywhere, nowhere? Consciousness is dissolving the spatial structure it maintains during waking, preparing for dreams where space doesn't behave consistently, where you can be in multiple places, or nowhere in particular. Thoughts change quality. Instead of linear, logical progressions, they drift and blend and transform. One thought merges into another without clear transition. Associations become looser, meanings shift. The tight control waking consciousness exerts over thinking releases. This is the hypnagogic state, the threshold between organized thinking and dream consciousness's free association. Sometimes images appear, fragments of dream already beginning, a face, a landscape, a situation without context. These are consciousness experimenting with dream creation before fully committing, testing the different rules, the more fluid universe building it's about to engage fully. The visions are partial, unstable, flickering, but they're preview of consciousness's other mode, unconstrained creation without external input. In this threshold, you might notice something interesting. Consciousness is doing all this. You're not controlling the drift into sleep, but consciousness is actively changing how it creates universe. It's releasing waking structures, adopting dream flexibility, transforming its creative process from structured to flowing, from controlled to spontaneous, from externally referenced to internally generated. This transition happens every night. Consciousness shifts modes, changes its universe-creating approach, moves from one type of reality construction to another type completely, and most nights, you're barely aware of it happening. Consciousness transforms itself while you're inside it, the creator and created simultaneously, awareness changing how it generates experience while remaining continuously aware. But tonight you might notice the structures are softening, time is blurring, thoughts are drifting. Consciousness is releasing its grip on waking universe construction, preparing to build dream universes instead. And you're here in the quiet between, aware of consciousness transforming its creative mode, watching the shift from inside the process. There's nothing to do here except allow. Let consciousness release waking structures, let the blurring happen, let time become uncertain, space become fluid, thoughts become dreamlike. This is consciousness's natural transition, its nightly transformation, its movement from one universe-creating mode to another. Trust the process. It knows what it's doing, even if you don't understand how. The quiet between is liminal space, threshold territory, neither fully waking nor fully sleeping. Consciousness is creating a transitional universe, unstable, temporary, designed to dissolve into sleep's deeper states. You won't stay here long. Either you'll rouse back to waking clarity, or you'll sink into full sleep and dreams. But for now, briefly, you're in the between, experiencing consciousness mid-transformation, universe building in transition, the creative process visible as it shifts from one mode to another. Notice it, appreciate it, then let it complete its transformation. Consciousness moving from waking to sleeping, from structured to fluid, from one universe to another, carrying you along into whatever creation comes next. Here we are, the end of this particular journey, though consciousness's journey never ends. Continuous creation moment after moment, universe after universe, always beginning, never complete. You've been creating your universe all along. While listening, while thinking, while experiencing whatever's arisen during this exploration, your consciousness has been building your experiential reality continuously, constructing perceptions, generating thoughts, creating the sense of time passing, the feeling of understanding or confusion, the experience of being you hearing these ideas. And now, as this content concludes, your consciousness will continue creating, shifting to sleep's universe-building mode, generating dreams or dreamless rest, constructing whatever experiential reality comes next. The creation never stops. It only transforms, changes mode, creates differently depending on consciousness's state. But for this moment, rest in what you've created. Your universe tonight has included this exploration, ideas about consciousness and reality, questions without answers, wonder and uncertainty mixed together. Whatever you're taking from this, whatever meanings you've created, whatever thoughts have arisen, these are all part of your universe, your consciousness's creation, unique to you. There's nothing you need to do with any of it. You don't need to remember everything, or understand completely, or change anything about how you live. You can simply rest in having experienced this particular universe creation, these specific moments of consciousness, exploring consciousness, awareness, wondering about awareness, your unique perspective on the mystery of being. As you drift into sleep, your consciousness will create new universes, dreams with their own logic, their own characters, their own realities that feel complete while you're in them, or perhaps deep sleep without dreams, consciousness resting from explicit creation while maintaining the basic awareness that you exist, you're here, you're still being consciousness even when creation quiets. All of this is valid. All of it is consciousness doing what it does, creating experiential reality in whatever mode it's operating. Waking universe, dream universe, sleeping universe, all are consciousness's creations, all equally real within their contexts. all temporary, all flowing into each other continuously. Your consciousness, you're creating your universe. And tonight, this moment, you can rest in that creation, let it be what it is, release any need to control or understand or perfect it. Your consciousness knows how to create. It's been doing it your entire life, every moment, without pause. You can trust it to continue, creating whatever comes next, building your experiential reality through sleep and into tomorrow's waking, continuous creation, endless transformation. So rest. Let consciousness do its creating. Let the universe it builds be your reality, fully, completely, without resistance. You're safe in your creation because you are your creation. Consciousness and universe not separate but one process. Awareness experiencing itself, being itself, creating itself continuously. Thank you for sharing this exploration, this particular universe creation, this moment of consciousness wondering together about consciousness. May your sleep be peaceful, your dreams be gentle, your unconscious creation be restful. May you wake to another universe creating day, consciousness continuing its eternal work, building experiential reality, making existence from awareness, being itself fully, miraculously, continuously. Rest now. Rest in your creation. Rest as your creation. Rest as consciousness creating rest itself, peace itself, sleep itself. The universe you're creating right now is exactly right. Let it be. Let it create you as you create it. Consciousness and universe one thing, always one thing, resting together, being together, creating together, now and through whatever comes next. Good night.